Hey friends, welcome to the Fireside. We are back with another episode from this past year's Richmond Tattoo and Arts Fest, hosted by our friend Jesse Smith. And today's guest is another familiar face, Russ Abbott, who is a good friend of the show, good friend of mine. We have had Russ on the show, I don't know, quite a few times now over the years. And it's always a fun conversation. We talk about a lot of stuff, as always, in this episode. We talk a good bit about tattooing, the future of tattooing, tattoo technologies, including Tattoo Smart, his online business where he sells stamp sets and brushes for Procreate and Clip Studio and Photoshop and all of those things, mostly Procreate these days, I believe. We talk a good bit about some of his competitors. And like always, it was a good conversation. I had a good time. I hope that you enjoy it and get something out of it, and we'll see you at the end. I didn't want to share what I was going to ask on the front end at all, so now nothing's a surprise that I ask you, which is a bummer. But I do want to start with what I just asked you. I'm curious. So I've been around Tattoo Smart since the very beginning. In fact, I remember having a conversation with you, and you gave me the name Tattoo Smart, and at the time it sounded like brush sets, and I didn't fully wrap my mind around what it was going to be. And I thought, like, yeah, dude, that sounds cool. You know, I thought maybe it was like, you know, like the Abbott color wheel was like a thing that you sold. It was a thing, and then people bought it, and then they used it, and then you had to come up with something else, you know, to sell. You know, and then
Yeah.
so that's kind of what I was thinking at the time.
Yeah,
And
that's kind of what it was, because I was selling the Abbott color wheel and a few other little things, products I created that were for education purposes for tattoo artists on Ink and Dagger, my tattoo studio's website. So, any of our clients would go to that website, and there would also be these things that Russ sells, and that just didn't make sense to me. So I needed a new place, and Tattoo Smart was that place. But of course, then it became so much bigger, right? Like it could be a marketplace where other people who make digital tools could sell them. So that was kind of the main thing. It was just going to be all about digital design for tattooing, and whatever things we could come up with, you know, as technology progressed, we would be there to serve that market.
yeah.
And that started in 2016.
2016. Okay.
2016 is also the year that the Apple Pencil came out for the iPad.
Oh, okay.
And so there was just, you know, a lucky time to create a platform like that.
I don't guess I realized that. Okay, so you so when you made those like, they weren't Procreate based necessarily, because they were for all.
Not at first.
Not at all.
Yeah, I was using a Wacom Cintiq and a computer for my designs, and so
Clip Studio.
Clip Studio was the software, and the brushes in Clip Studio, in a lot of ways are better, especially the repeater brushes, your ropes, chains, snake scales, all of those. So even back then, I was exploring, like, what can we do? Because Clip Studio was made for Japanese manga, and it's a really, really great set of software. And it already had brushes that did that type of stuff, but they weren't tattoo style. And so I learned, just watch YouTube tutorials, and I learned how to switch out the artwork in a brush and adjust the settings to make it repeat and do all the things. And I just started kind of playing with it. You know, it was just a lot of R&D. You know, it's I wonder if I can do this. You know, and so it felt like we were always discovering something that, you know, was heading towards something, right? Something useful that I could use or another tattoo artist could use.
Right. So I've always kind of thought that I just misunderstood the whole thing from the start. I was thinking brushes. I remember like the Cheyenne needle groupings and the things like that. Was the idea of stamp sets and collaborating with artists on your mind at that point, or that came later? Was it like drawing tools?
Yeah, no, it was the first set of products that I thought were going to be everyone's favorite, that turned out that no one cared, were the digital palettes. So because I'd already made the Abbott color wheel, which was, during that process, I'd figured out how to accurately sample the color of tattoo ink and apply it to a color wheel. So the Abbott color wheel had 250 or something colors organized on it, and I was going to use the same technology to create digital palettes of other brands. So the original lineup included Fusion Ink, Eternal Ink, World Famous Ink, a few others.
Yeah.
And we got all the ink in the studio, which was nice. We had like all this tattoo ink to play with, but we got all the ink and we sampled every color, and we did all this, built these fancy spreadsheets and took the data from the color and turned it into swatch files that would work in Photoshop and they would work in Clip Studio, and you just kind of import the file and then you have all of the colors. And I thought that would be a hit.
Sure.
Turned out it wasn't, and there weren't a lot of people that wanted to work in that way. To paint their tattoo designs with accurate colors.
Yeah.
And so.
And sometimes it's just a matter of like being almost like a stepping stone in technology, because now you can like bring in a photograph or an illustration and like map, like drag and drop that full color palette, like create a color palette from a photograph,
right.
Which is obviously super cool. It may not be mapped necessarily to a tattoo pigment, but the color is there. And so probably if something like that had already existed, you would have been less likely to put the effort into creating the color palette, right? I mean, maybe not. Maybe you just really thought people would. I don't know.
It's a lot of times it's just like throwing as many hooks into the water as you can and seeing which one they bite on. That was a good example of something that I like definitely overinvested in. That eventually I just pulled them off the site because they were just kind of taking up space and people didn't seem to be interested in them. Also, I didn't want to keep supporting the constant new colors coming out from all these companies, so they were getting outdated.
Right. That probably makes it easier. I would imagine otherwise it's difficult to put so much time and work into something and then it's one thing to say, okay, it's not performing the way that I had hoped and make excuses for yourself, but when you finally come to terms with it and you're like, I'm just pulling it down where it's not available anymore, that's like a real recognition to yourself that it's a failure,
Yeah, sure.
So
there've been a few of those.
Right. So that doesn't even, my starting question we haven't even gotten to yet. What I've noticed over the last months or year or so is that I'm, half of my Instagram feed is sponsored or things that they think I might like. It's not even people that I care to see, necessarily. But I see all of these, I don't have any names to throw out, but essentially it will be like 25,000 Procreate brushes for $9.99. Or maybe there's stamp sets as well. I don't go into it to see what they are.
Yeah.
But I guess I think about you a lot whenever I see that, because I'm just like, shit, how do you people are only paying attention for a second, right? And you just have a little square that they're paying to get your point across. And like, how do you separate what you're doing? First off, if you'll separate what you're doing from what those are doing, would be helpful for probably people who are paying attention. And then second, like, how do you separate yourself and grab people's attention so they know in a short period of time, they're like, hey, these two, we're not comparing apples and apples right here.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, first off, like, what are those companies, right? Because they're not run by a tattoo artist, right? You can't, like, they might say something like for artist, by artist or something, but when I've really dug in, I'm like, I don't know who this is. And also when I see the product that they're putting out, it's very, very obvious, either it's AI generated stuff or it's stuff that they just stole from the internet and compiled it. And, I actually had one a couple of years ago. I saw one of our product images on their ad. And this obviously is a problem, right?
Sure.
We pay a lot of money and work very hard to create these products. And so I went to their website and I found the contact and I reached out to them and I said, hey, you've got our work on your website, like, what's going on? And they basically were like, I'm so sorry, we're just teenagers in this other country and we wanted to have a business and we paid like $500 to this other group of teenagers and to make our website and like our product, and this is what they did.
Wow.
We'll take it down immediately. So sorry. And I got, man, really? Like, okay. So I think if you rewind a little bit, it's, I guess I didn't follow up, but I never saw the ad again. Some of these companies are, obviously outsiders from tattooing, who are looking at what's the thing that I can generate some, side hustle money on. Let's see if this works. Let's do this. Let's do that. Right. And so there's not any of the things that we do. I've built relationships in tattooing, right? Like I go out and I source artwork from people who are experts in the subject matter and the style that they're working in, and then we work together, and they work really hard, we work really hard, we compensate them really well, and there's an obvious difference in what the experience of working with something that we made is compared to that. The problem I guess that I see is just that like people come along to tattooing, and there's so many things that at the beginning of their career that they might think they need to invest in, and if buying a set of tattoo stamp brushes is on that list, how many of those shitty ones do they encounter before they just kind of go, well, that's dumb. Yeah, it's not worth it. Like I shouldn't even bother. But we used to be the only company doing this. Now there's several others that are run by tattoo artists, and, putting out quality stuff. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff on Etsy, so much, and the Google search is flooded, right? Like if you type in Procreate tattoo brushes, we used to be the only ones. Right. Now we're just one of many, right? And so that's just the way that it goes, right? The only thing that can happen is the market becomes more watered down with competitors. So it's just about like, you're still focusing on what we can do and like what we want to do, and trying to help educate people about why they should even pay attention to this. Really, for me, it's always just been about getting to that next future, like being prepared to help to bring something more interesting to tattooing. It hasn't really been about like, oh, I'm so excited about flash stamp brushes. That wasn't even my original intent with the company. It's just what tattoo artists seem to want to buy. And, so in order to keep the lights on, we keep doing it. And along the way, I've really started to enjoy it. Like it started to look like this is going to be a giant library of really, really well-drawn tattoo flash that, I've curated the entire time. So it's already that, like when you look at the site, like there's so many now. Yeah. And I think there's still room for so many more, and I'm excited to keep working on these. But we do like one product a month, at most maybe two. Right. So I think the pace is slowed from what it used to be, but it's still something I'm working on.
You're always thinking. I think about like how people interpret things, how they are like trying to like gauge your audience, and even the language that they speak and all that kind of thing. So with that in mind, that you are doing something completely different than something that's either generated by a bunch of teenagers in another country or AI or whatever. Do you have any like way that you are trying to grab attention, separate yourself in, whether through social media, through your email campaigns, through your like just how you interact with people? Is there any way to separate yourself in a flash? Or do you have to depend just on kind of the original grassroots, boots on the ground effort of like, well, these people know Tattoo Smart. I'm going to keep putting out great stuff and keep hoping that they'll share it, not physically share the files with their friends, but share share the word with their friends. They're like, oh yeah, this isn't like that. This is like, these are legit, tattooers that are making these things, and
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I mean, there was always the like the bootlegger guy like coming to your shop to sell you flash, and you knew it wasn't actually made by that person because you know him. And that ethos and that ethic is still in the minds of a lot of people who have been tattooing a long time, but I don't think it's really that prevalent in the new generation and newer generations. Right. But yeah, I don't even know how we got talking about that. It was like one little piece of what you asked me, but the fact is, like, yeah, you can share our product, you can airdrop it straight out of Procreate to all your friends. We know it happens. We hope it happens in like a 1-to-1 kind of thing where instead of like everyone gathering 100 people at a convention and just like airdropping it out there. But because look, obviously I'm working very hard. My team is working very hard. The artists that we're working with are working very hard to put something out there, and we hope that people are gonna value it, and that it'll make sense for them to pay what we're asking. We actually do have a 10-day money back, 100% satisfaction guarantee. Right? Like, I don't think a lot of people know that, but you can purchase something from us, and if you don't like it, you can just let us know you don't like it, and you can't give it back to us because you've already got it.
Right.
And you can still give it to 100 of your friends, and we'll give you your money back, right? So
Yeah.
that's my answer to it. It's like, if you bought something from us and you thought it was so terrible that you wanted to cause damage to us by putting it out there and having that next person put it out there again, share. If that's the way that you feel about what we gave you or what we sold to you, then I guess we did a bad job. That's kind of the risk I gotta take. But yeah, you can come back and you can get your money back.
It's
and we do a few times a week. It's not
really?
It's not hundreds. Not maybe this could be the reason, right? Like all of a sudden, Tattoo Smart's gonna be ruined.
Yeah.
But look, you can do that, and sometimes people do, and when they do, it's an opportunity for us to say, curious, like, what was it? What was it that, how did we not meet your expectations? And a lot of times it's just, it wasn't what I thought it was, based on what you were able to show me before I bought it, like, it didn't really tick the right boxes. And we can learn from that,
Sure.
We can learn from that conversation.
Yeah, and I guess at some point you have to, for your own peace of mind, you have to either find a way to fight that sharing kind of thing tooth and nail and figure out a way to stop it, or the far other extreme is what you've done, is where you just come to terms with it. Like, not only do we know you can take it, but it's like, you can take it and we'll just pay you back if you're that, it's kind of a way to say, if you're that big of a shithead, we'll just give it back to you and you can just live with yourself.
It's kind of unheard of. I don't know if any of our competitors do it.
I had never heard you say that you've done that.
I don't know. Yeah, we've been doing it for like a year now. Yeah, it says it. It says it in multiple places where you purchase, and it says it even in the emails that you get back. And, we have support at tattoosmart.com. My coworker Sarah is in that inbox every day unless it's the weekend, and she's the one that has to figure out how to get your money back or how to help you fix your password or whatever's going on. So it's human support. It's not some data center in some other country. It's it's a small company,
right?
And
I think
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think it is important, and you hit on it, that you put a lot of time and effort in, and your team, but then also the artist that creates the stuff. If you are an artist, which I guess if you're buying brush sets or stamp sets, you are, just the idea that you're taking advantage of an artist who took the time to create the stamp set.
Yeah, it truly is that. I mean, it would be very similar to, making copies of the Flash that they sold you and give them to all your friends. It's probably worse than that because it takes the time and effort to make a copy. Like airdropping something is instant. Easy. But there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, it's a feature that Procreate built into their app, and until Procreate decides to unbuild that feature, that's just what it is.
Right. You mentioned a minute ago you've started Tattoo Smart with the idea and the color wheel, everything with the idea that you just continue to evolve as a creator of things for the tattoo world, at least mostly for the tattoo world, I guess. So what I think that's my coach Dan says, when people have complaints about people biting stuff off of them, we've had the same thing with Fireside for years, where people are either physically copying, downloading, and re-uploading and monetizing our videos, which was happening from some Russian outfit a while back, which was pretty crazy. Getting a lot of views, marketing it and stuff like that, getting paid. And then
dude,
getting way more. I was like, can we hire you?
Sometimes that might be the right idea.
Right. But my coach, Dan, says, no one can copy the next thing. They can always copy the current thing, but no one can copy the next thing. So if you're always focused on the next thing, then that's the way that you kind of keep your mind straight when it comes to that type of thing. So
it is,
yeah. So what has that been lately for you, the next thing?
For Tattoo Smart, it's been the 3D models that work in Procreate. So we have this whole line. They're called Model Humans. They're 3D body parts. There's entire people. There's like 8 different characters. They all have names.
Yeah.
And they're all different body types, right? So there's 4 different females, 4 different males. You've got an athletic build, an obese build, a thin build, and somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And then we also recently put out kind of a giant pack of just alternatives for sleeves and arm sleeves, leg sleeves, torsos. So just kind of like we didn't really want to like overdo it, because to do every single body type with all of these options was just an unbelievably huge investment in every way. So, but I did see opportunities to improve or to give more options. People were asking for more options for where the seam is cut on the sleeve, for example. Yeah, like for example on the arm sleeves, where the seam is cut, like where, if you unwrap a human arm, like where is the seam? Because with all 3D models, the best way to work on them is actually working on the flattened out part, where you can sketch on the model and you can kind of get your layout, and then you flatten it out into 2D mode, and then you can see your sketch on a flattened out version of an arm. And so on the original 8 model humans, the seam for the arm runs straight down the middle of the inner arm, so it's like down here. And unfortunately, that wasn't what everyone wanted. Sometimes people wanted to really easily put their artwork on the inner arm, so we needed to make variations. And in the advanced, they're called Model Humans Advanced 3D Body Parts is what the newest set is called. And that's the one that has like a whole lot of options for different sleeves and legs. And that's pretty much the one I would recommend anyone get to start with if you're just getting into model humans. I don't know if you have any idea like what the purpose of them is, or why anyone would even
Yeah, I mean,
use them,
I have an idea. I've never used them myself. I have your earlier versions, the Protoplast, is that what they were called?
Yeah, so Protoplast was images
of people.
3D models that you can use as stamps. And those are still really popular. People really love those.
I still use them for layout if I don't have great photos of the client, or if I'm presenting an idea that and the client's out of town or something like that.
Those are great.
It's great for that kind of stuff. I really like them. And like you're saying, I assume similar to Model Humans, there are enough variations of body types where I can I usually will try to get an idea, like let's say I did a Zoom conversation for our consultation, but I haven't met them in person. Just based on their appearance, I'll try to get an idea of what their body type is, and then I'll back off a body type whenever I choose it, so they look more, like a little more attractive.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings up a funny thing. So we had to go through this whole process of thinking about this. Like how do we represent a giant range of possible human body types in a range? So we started with 3. It was like the kind of workout physique, the kind of thin person and the obese person.
Right.
And then we were like, what was it 4? I can't remember. I think it was 4 to start, and then we just added Norm and Norma, which makes it, I don't know, maybe it's a total of 10 model humans now.
Okay.
So Norm and Norma were named because they are the normal body type, right? There's a little pot belly, Norm's arms are kind of not that muscular,
right?
He's just kind of everyman. Right. And then, but if you look at, what are people actually buying, right? Your 2 most fit women and your muscle guy Ryan
really
are the most popular choices, and
why do you think that
unfortunately
is?
The obese ones
people
are the least popular.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about why. I mean, that tracks, right? Humanity, but the thing about it is like you just pointed out, if we're going to look at our client and then select the 3D model that we think is the closest to them, put our design on it, and then show it back to them, what's that going to feel like for anyone who's oh,
right,
that's the one you picked? So it's whether, and it could be like people have all kinds of hang-ups about their bodies, right? What if the guy you picked to represent your client was too skinny, right? And he's like, oh man, he thinks I'm skinny.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe it just makes sense to only put our designs on the most athletic, steroid jacked guy, and
Yeah, I guess
I
I
don't know.
get, and I guess it's a use case thing because like if I'm doing wanna do designs and I'm like trying to sell back pieces or bodysuits or whatever, big tattoos that like fit the body nicely, I probably want to put them on the best looking figure. So it's like, hey, this could be you, you know?
Right.
But if you're using it like I am, where I just don't, you ask someone who's out of town, who's flying in to get tattooed, to send you photos, and it's like selfies in the mirror with a glare of their leg, and you're like, I'll just figure it out,
Yeah.
And then I'm using it as a tool rather than they're both used as tools, but you know what I mean? I'm using it as a tool for myself to like, all right, this is close to them, and I want it to be flattering enough,
Right.
when they get it back. So
Yeah. I mean, all those thoughts were going through our minds as we were working through this process, and like, how do we make this actually useful? The 3D models are mostly just useful for people who are doing full sleeves, full leg sleeves, full back pieces, full torsos.
Yeah.
That's where I really think like this workflow makes a lot of sense, because it's obviously difficult when you're laying out a full sleeve on a flat piece of paper. We've all figured out ways to do it. We've all got a process, but with something like this, I'm able to really, really mess around with how the elements fit on the arm or the leg, and I come up with some, I hope, more interesting compositions because I have this tool.
Yeah.
And the second part to that is, so you could just do like basic sketching on this. If you want, you can draw directly on the 3D model, and then you can flatten it out into 2D, and you can export that 2D as your base layer, your base sketch in a regular Procreate file.
Okay.
And you can just make it as detailed and fully developed and rendered as you want. And then you can take that back to the 3D model and map it back onto the body part.
Yeah.
And I think that's the workflow that most people miss. They try to do all the rendering directly on the model, or some kind of way that it just doesn't work as well. It's a little bit uncomfortable. So that's why I'm actually teaching a workshop here at the Richmond convention and at Paradise next week, because I've found that we've tried to make videos about how to do this, and like we've tried to show people in as many ways as we can like how to think about it, but it's just a lot of people need that hands-on kind of like step-by-step kind of do-it-yourself workshop kind of environment. So I'm hoping that people will attend that, and that maybe I'll get a little bit better at teaching other people how to do this too.
Yeah, I think saying things out loud in front of people too is like the best way to learn if you're saying it right, if it's getting across. Like it's one thing to make a video, make it super polished and give instructions on your website before or during when they download or whatever, but when you say things to a group of people and you're looking at their faces, you can tell it didn't land on any of them. You're like, all right, I'm saying that wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
for sure.
So it's pretty helpful. I think one thing about that workflow that you just went through that could be so useful to so many people, especially people who are just getting into large scale tattooing, is how you always can tell the difference between what I think is a really well designed sleeve, for example, as opposed to a beginner sleeve. It's just like look at the tricep and the back of the arm and see where stuff comes together, and see if people just end up with a lot of times it's you're designing a few main elements that sit on the areas that you think about first, and then you get to a point where you have an oh shit moment. You're like, I'm just gonna like blend this into that, and you'll end up with this kind of like area of the tattoo where there's just nothing cool to look at, and I think that I fought with that a long time too. Sorry for spitting on you. I fought with that a long time too, and I make a point now to think about like no matter what angle a viewer experiences this tattoo, I want there to be something that grabs their attention at that angle,
Yeah.
And so that workflow where you're drawing it flat, but then you wrap it back on, you're like, oh shit, like that actually doesn't sit where I thought it would. I need to scoot that in a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's switching from 3D to 2D a lot during the sketch process is nice, because there's this sort of distortion that happens when you take a flat image and you wrap it around a cylindrical body part, right? And it's really hard to predict when you're only drawing flat. So once you get into working in this way, you've kind of already problem solved a lot of things that you would have had to do when the client got there in person. After you've printed out this giant stencil and taped all the pieces together and you think you got it, and you go to stencil it and you're like, holy shit, like that didn't work out like I thought it would.
Right.
This helps fix that.
Yeah. Well, so that's the thing that you're working right now in Procreate. Oh, before we leave that subject, we've talked over the years, I know, and was thinking about it when I was working on a product that was called Digital Skin with Sean Molina and another person that it was like a projection mapping type of stencil thing of actually mapping the physical client's body. And I don't know if we ever talked about it. I went down to Huntsville and went into one of these. It's essentially like a little sphere that they would like photograph you in the round, and then they could they were printing you. They were like making a 3D model
I had
of you.
one of those made myself like
really?
6 years ago. Yeah,
Really?
I had that exact experience.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so as they were doing that, I was like, oh, I wonder if we could like essentially do the model humans, but with the human that you're tattooing.
Yeah, you could. And so you're standing in a cylinder of cameras. I don't know, there's like 100 cameras, and they're all connected to a very, very expensive computer. All of them take a picture at one time, and then that computer and the software turn all of those photos into a 3D model. So that's how that works. That's called, a version of it is called photogrammetry.
Yeah.
That might be photogrammetry. Someone out there is going to be like, no, that's not photogrammetry. Right? I'm pretty sure that's what it's called.
Right.
Stitching a bunch of photos. Now there's apps that do that. There's apps that you can walk around anything, a person, a scene, and take a bunch of pictures, and then it'll shoot them up to the cloud, and it'll send you back a 3D model. And yes, you could use that to get a 3D model of your client. The issue that I've found with it is that it's not to scale, right? It's just a model. It doesn't know how big or small it is, and that may or may not be a problem. But I think the ultimate solution, the one that I feel like I'm waiting for, is the one where we can just pull out our smartphone and it's got everything it needs to create a scaled model of our client without a lot of extra work, right? So someone has to build an app or an interface that knows this is for tattoo design. This is a human. We're going to eventually be designing a tattoo on them, and so it needs to be exported in this very specific way. And right now, all those things are possible, and I've met people who have been doing it. There's one called Thomas Cinnamon out of Seattle.
Yeah.
He's a tattoo artist, and he's been scanning people. He ended up figuring out how to do it with like a handheld scanning device. It's very expensive, $20,000-$30,000 or something he's invested in this process. And he actually teaches workshops on it. So if there's anyone listening to this who wants to learn how they can right now with that amount of investment, the process where they can scan their clients, he's doing it. And it's really impressive. Of course, what I'm waiting for is it to become easy and accessible, right? Like if you look at the adoption of digital design and tattooing, right? Like I was doing it before the iPad and the Apple Pencil came out, and it was a bigger investment. You had to learn more complicated software. You had to just kind of take a leap and spend a few $1,000s to buy all this gear. And then the iPad came along and made it more accessible, right? And that's when the shift happens. Even still, we're still at a place where there's still a few tattoo artists out there that don't work digitally, but we've seen a massive shift. And so I guess it's possible that there's some future state where the tattoo process always starts with capturing a 3D scan of your client and then working on it in some kind of 3D space, right? There'll always be people that don't want that, but
for those
people who, well, look, we're seeing it already. Like, I think we're going to expect it more in the future. What I mean is, we're seeing visualizations of what a product or service will be like before we buy it, right? I always use the example of rugs.com. You can go to rugs.com, you can upload a picture of your living room with your sofa and your coffee table and all of your things, and it will very quickly put that rug that you're looking at on their website into that space, in perspective, and it looks like it belongs there. That experience makes you more confident that that's the right rug for you, right? And they're doing that now with eyeglasses. You can buy glasses online, and you can see them on your face. And when you move your head, they move. That's all possible. And at a certain point in the future, we're doing that with every clothing article we buy. We're getting, pants and shirts that fit us because we scanned ourselves really quickly with an app, and it was able to figure out what the right size was for us. So, of course, customers in the future are going to expect to see what is this tattoo going to look like on me. Right. And there's going to be some tattoo artists that realize that opportunity and want to want to take it on and give them that. And there's some people like me that want to do that now. We are doing it now, through all kinds of other ways. But I'm not like Thomas Cinnamon. I haven't gone out and invested in this 3D scanner thing. So I just use like surrogates. I use Tattoo Smart's model humans, and we have a bunch of different body types. We can adjust the skin tone to more closely match the client, and we put the design onto a 3D model of them. When it's something that they need, or something that it's either something I need, like I want it for my own design process, and then I'll just share it with them, and hopefully they'll be delighted. And in some cases, there's clients out there who really do value seeing it.
Sure. Yeah. It's funny that, and most likely that process will come. Tattooing will probably adopt it from larger industries. Those technologies, like you're talking about with clothing and glasses, we're already seeing that they'll solve the bigger problems and will adapt.
As far as I know, there's not anyone who's more interested in seeing this come to tattooing than me.
Right.
And I've been interested in this idea since probably 2014, 2015, where I kept thinking, we're right around the corner. We're going to have that soon. And I want to be the one to make it happen.
Yeah.
I want to usher in that future that I imagined. And, all this time, all those attempts that I've made to try to figure out is it possible now, and seeing how it is possible also with what Thomas is doing has made me realize that, it'll probably come off the back of innovation in fashion, in medical, right? Because you're trying to make, obviously any other giant pillar of industry will solve a problem. So many of the problems around this enough to where the tattoo use case will become obvious.
Yeah,
it'll just be like, oh, okay, we just have to take this and tweak it just tiny bit.
Yeah. There's a great. I'll forget what it's called, but Peter Diamandis has a thing that he calls the 5 Ds or the 7 Ds. I don't know what they are, but it's about how technology moves. And the Ds, I might be wrong on the order, but it's first they are deceptive, that doesn't really mean anything. It's not going to make any difference. Mm-hmm. Then it becomes disruptive. And then eventually it becomes demonetized. So you're saying that Thomas Cinnamon's spending $20,000 and eventually you'll be able to do it with your iPhone. So think about the cost of taking photographs when you first started tattooing versus the cost of taking photographs today, and then, so what did I say? Deceptive, disruptive, demonetized, and democratized. Because once it's demonetized, basically it becomes accessible to everyone. I might be missing another one, but he has a great explanation for how that works, and he can show you dozens and dozens of technologies that follow those Ds really specifically. Yeah. So it's fun to see where things might be in the realm, when you identify a technology.
And so many things that we thought we were going to just about to have, right? Over the last couple of years, it's been what do you call it? VR, right? Mm-hmm. Meta investing so heavily into VR. Now Apple's got their thing, and it's kind of a flop.
Right.
All these really, really smart people at all these really amazing companies that think now's the time to go and invest in this thing, and then it doesn't work for now, and then they're like, okay, well, hold on, maybe it's going to be another 5 years, maybe it's going to be another 10 years, and or maybe never.
Right.
It's really hard to imagine never, but tattooing is going to keep changing. It just is. Of course it is, right? The people who get tattoos in the future are going to interact with tattooing in a totally different way, and you and I will probably think it's dumb. That's just what keeps happening, right? There was a you and I 50 years ago that would think what we do now is dumb.
Right.
Sure. But they were innovators in their own time.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think that I think that's true. I think it is fun to kind of see where, to at least for your own peace of mind to be able to think about. Well, this is frustrating me. For example, digital skin was something I don't know that I've talked about it a lot on here, but the idea that we invested a lot of time into was projection mapping / AR stenciling. So essentially, if you had layers in Photoshop, you had a photo layer and a line layer and a shading layer. You could cycle through layers with voice commands. You could say like, show me the, say you're doing a portrait, show me the photo, drop it to 40% opacity, show me the line overlay. Okay, I got it. And then you're doing all that live on the skin. And you can see all of the individual pieces of the puzzle that I was thinking of exist independent of each other. So all of those things are true. They happen. They just don't happen on the skin while you're stretching the skin. So there were enough pieces that didn't work right. For example, there was some issue with geometry where there were 3 points. And I started thinking about it because I saw a router, a handheld router that was essentially a CNC. Like you could make it a CNC by laying this grid tape over the piece of wood, using a program, and it would follow the grid. And I was like, oh, we could probably do that with tattoo stencils in some way. We could project the grid, project the image within the grid, and when I stretch the skin, it'll know the distance between the grid pieces, and it'll adapt the stencil. That just turned out not to be true right now. So even though it's frustrating now.
It's still going to happen.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Eventually. Like when Apple Vision Pro, I went and tried it on at Apple, and I ended up buying it just to find out like what the experience was like, to think about whether or not I could like actually tattoo while looking through it. Answer is no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
It was quite heavy. It was just, I ended up taking it back. You get 30 days to try it out. So anyone can go if you want to buy yourself an Apple Vision Pro and you can experience it. But at the time I was thinking, well, I got to do this. It's R&D. I got to find out if this is something that could help realize that future. And yeah, it probably can. Once they're on their 3rd, 4th, 5th generation and they've fixed a lot of those problems,
right.
Or maybe whatever Meta's coming out with next, or whatever someone else is going to do, like that endless kind of like cycle of innovation is always going to keep happening. So it's going to get smarter, lighter, faster, better, cheaper.
Right.
All those things will happen.
Yeah. Follow the 5 Ds.
You can kind of imagine like what the ideal version of it would be. Is like I would never have to stencil anything on the skin. I would just look at the skin and I would see whatever stencil I needed to see, and it would always track, and it would never get glitchy, and never, I wouldn't start the outline and then it would move somewhere else. Like it would just be perfect.
Right.
And if I wanted, like you said, voice command, let me see it colored in again. All right, take the color back away. And now it's like, run a simulation of what happens if I add red in the hair, It's like, okay, here, red in the hair. And I guess AI can probably do that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Even if COVID disrupted us, disrupted my project, and we just have never gotten back on our feet. But just the leaps in AI from 2019 to today, I pitched this idea because I'm always thinking about tattooers. It was a tattooer's tool to me. As we looked at raising money for it, people were like, it needs to be for the end user. So what about, you were saying, a visualization tool? What if someone could cycle through geometric designs for their forearm, project it onto their arm, test different colors? Maybe AI could look at their skin tone and give them a color palette recommendation. They could social share right there on the spot and say, hey, should I get it here or here? Should I get it? I'm at the studio. I'm in the consultation room. Like, should I get it in red or blue? And their friends can thumb it up or thumb it down. So that was their idea on how it would work first, and then evolve to my idea.
I think you got to, if you really want to make something viable for the market for that much investment, then it's got to appeal to a much wider audience than people who are doing tattoos for a living.
Yeah.
And so the next obvious step is like people who get tattoos. Much more people.
Right.
We of course we think about that with Tattoo Smart. Like, we created all this artwork, and currently our customer is the tattoo artist. Is there a version where it makes sense that the customer becomes the client?
Right.
Right. But of course we know as artists, like I know a lot of people who tattoo. We just heard what you were saying a few minutes ago, and we're kind of cringing when they're thinking about like creating this like endless amount of indecision in their clients, right?
Yeah.
Because that's probably what would happen, right? Like if you give people these tools to like, even AI does this, right? If you're just like gonna sit there and like keep typing in words, instantly seemingly amazing pictures show up. You could never pick one. You could never feel settled that this is the one.
Right.
And I definitely think that's only going to become more of an issue in the future with this whole visualization thing. It's like we're giving people all these tools to, be able to see a million options. How are they ever going to pick one?
Right. Yeah.
It actually comes back probably to just needing to have someone or some kind of guide say, no, this is the best one,
Right.
and give them some certainty about it.
Yeah.
I think most clients don't even want any of that. They just want the artist to be confident.
Yeah,
Right.
that's one of the big sayings that I hear a lot now is it's like the question is will AI replace me? Will AI take my job? And it's like the answer is AI probably won't take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI better than you will definitely take your job.
Right.
And so that's the type of relationship there. It's like an artist who knows how to use. Like I'm not a fan of like asking Midjourney to make my tattoo designs, but I'm certainly more than comfortable asking Midjourney to give me dozens of pieces of reference that I can like plop down on my screen and use to draw from and still like translate it to my own voice. I think that's actually a much more effective way for me to design than just screenshotting a bunch of Pinterest and Google images, for sure.
Yeah.
And so that's the difference. In like AI isn't going to do that, but AI is going to help me to do it. So.
Well, yeah, anytime you give a human a tool that helps them do one part of their process a little more efficiently or a little faster, if that human is passionate and as an artist, they're going to use up all of that free time to push some other part further, I think, in theory. So like the argument that this tool or that tool is just going to make everybody lazy isn't true. It's going to let some people continue to be lazy because they already were lazy. And if there's a person who's not lazy, they're going to take that extra level up and push even further. So we all get to see potentially a more interesting version of tattooing because of that tool, whatever the tool.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the same, argument I make for digital design tools, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're going to sacrifice some, huge amounts of time that you otherwise would have spent to do something, and you might not feel so good about it because it wasn't that hard to do.
Right.
And there's definitely something to that.
Yeah, you want to be challenged.
Artists are just proud of the effort that they make, and quite frankly, the audience likes their art better when they see that it was hard.
Sure.
When you just show someone a painting these days, it could look like AI might have done it, and that takes away the power unless you show how hard it was.
Yeah.
So like artists, I think nowadays that are doing things the hard way, that are doing things with physical media, are going to benefit a lot from documenting how hard it was.
Right.
And making that documentation of the process a piece of the presentation of the art, because otherwise people, they're not, especially if they're looking at it online, they're not going to see the brushstrokes. They're not going to see the effort. Yeah,
we're seeing that so much more lately as social media has moved to video and things like that. We're seeing so much of people's processes, and I think I hadn't thought about why, but I bet that's a great reason why. It's like, hey, if you just saw the end result, it could have been anything. It could have gotten there in 10 minutes. You don't know.
Yeah. I think a lot of the value comes from how difficult it was to make it. So,
right. Yeah.
What the craft is still alive.
Yeah.
And we're impressed by it still.
Same here. You, on a slightly different topic, and I know we're going to get food in a few minutes, so I'll find a wrap-up point, but you've gone back to tattoo. You went quite a few years with it, with doing almost no tattooing at all, right?
I was tattooing 1 day a week. I never slowed down from that. But sometimes I would travel, and so it might be 2 or 3 weeks in between a 1 day a week session.
Right.
I just got so busy between running my studio and everything that was going on with Tattoo Smart a few years back. It just really, it reached sort of the pinnacle. It was a company with 6 employees and a bunch of different subcontractors, designers, and 3D modelers, and all these different things. And I was, basically out there trying to figure out how to become the CEO of a small, tech publishing company. And I was doing a lot of personal development and really thinking okay, it doesn't really make sense for me to. It makes sense for me to tattoo from the research and development side of it, to stay connected to tattooing, to be able to think of the new ideas. But it didn't make a lot of sense for me to be tattooing full time. There just wasn't enough time, and my back was hurting.
Yeah.
Every time I would sit down to tattoo, I was having pain in my shoulder blades and in between my shoulder blades, and pretty much it was just miserable.
It was a tough time.
And I needed to go fix that.
And you've
now
done a
I have-
lot. You're in much
yeah.
better physical condition than you were when you were tattooing before. Huh?
Yeah. I lost a bunch of weight and I started going to the gym. First, I started just like 2 days a week with a personal trainer, and these days I'm going 5 days a week, and I'm like actually like strength training and trying not to hurt myself, but also just trying to undo a lot of years of not taking care of my body. Trying to make sure that at 45 I build enough muscle to, like, as I grow older and you start naturally losing muscle. I think after you hit like 70 years old or something, you start losing like 5% of muscle every decade or something.
Right.
So if you build it up during this time of your life, you have more to lose, so you can be 80 and still be able to walk upstairs and be able to lift a suitcase into an overhead bin on the airplane and still enjoy that time of your life.
Yeah, right. Well, if anything, like leaving, not necessarily leaving tattooing 1 day a week, as opposed to coming back and like you've made an effort. I've seen it where you're like, hey, I want to start some projects. I want to do some new, interesting, fun things. So you're having to first kind of identify like what's interesting and fun. What do people expect out of me based on what they saw 10 years ago or however long, and how much of that do I want to carry forward? How has it impacted the shop, I guess, and the other artists with you being there more? Has it been a net positive, or would you even know that?
I think so. I mean, to answer that question, I have a shop with 15 resident artists, and a lot of them had started working there during the period where they were told from the very beginning, Russ is only here every once in a while. There were ones before that who were more impacted by me cutting back, right? Because there's always going to be the, oh man, it's not the same as it used to be conversations. And I was really conscious of that at the time when I was, it was basically creating a problem in the culture in my shop because I needed to be there less. And it was a problem for people that, felt that me being there was part of the reason that they wanted to be there, And so as new team members came on, we just tried to be like really honest about what they could expect of me. And I show them all the time the effort that I'm putting in from my home, where I'm working on our website, I'm working on our marketing, I'm working on our brand. We have an active WhatsApp group where we're all communicating, and like I have meetings with them, every few months. I take each of them out to breakfast or lunch and just check in. Because even in the times I am tattooing, I'm tattooing, right? So there's not a lot of like back and forth time,
So what about you as far as the work that you're trying to do? I'm assuming you don't want to just like jump right back into 3D geometry and like and ornamental all the time. You do want to?
Yeah. Like,
okay.
So 45 years old, I feel like 10 more years is all I have to do some bodysuits. So my dream is that some people out there with no tattoos, wherever you are, people with no tattoos or a few things that need to be covered up or reworked or whatever, will love what I'm doing and just want me to come create an entire bodysuit of cohesive tattoos. I've had a few opportunities to do it along the way, that didn't meet that, no tattoos criteria. That's like really rare, right?
That's rare.
That would be the dream. But the kind of work I do, in full color, sometimes I do black and gray work too, but the kind of work I do, it takes a long time. A lot of times it's really super intricate. I wear magnifying glasses and I put some of the patterns in, but I also try to keep other parts of it really simple so that we can be more efficient with time. But I mean, ultimately, like, I think my work is architectural and ornamental. So, I mean, it can span centuries of ornamental design, the way that humans from different cultures decorated buildings. I'm applying that to the human form. So, I use the scroll work a lot because it just helps navigate areas of the body that aren't good for linear designs. So, one of the main themes that you'll see, especially in my recent work, I just did this leg sleeve, and that client's getting a second leg sleeve in the same style. And it's just ornamental scroll work, and then the pattern that's happening is kumiko. It's a Japanese woodworking.
Oh.
If you've ever seen in Japan, they really carefully cut pieces of wood into strips, and then they arrange them into an isometric grid. So they're like cutting out notches, and they're clicking them together.
Oh, right.
And they create wooden panels or screens. And they can change the color of the wood. And so it's not just that isometric grid, that's like the base grid. And then within each of those triangles on the grid, there's a different pattern.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm using the Kamiko patterns to create these geometric tattoos. And I'm just applying color to it in a way that looks cool.
Yeah.
And
do you have a
that's really
stamp
what it
set
is.
for those patterns, or you're having to do
I
them?
don't have a stamp set for them yet. I do have my own private digital tool that I use to make the design a little bit easier, but I haven't made it into a product. I mean, in fact, I don't think anybody really cares. Like, I'm like one of
What's
3
going on,
people
Richmond,
that would
Virginia?
even do it.
It's time
Right.
for the moment that at least some of us have been
So
waiting for.
the loud contest mic guy is starting. I don't know if they can still hear us, but I think that's probably
That's
going to
probably
be
our sign to shut it down. But if we need to talk about anything else, we'll be in Paradise next week together. So maybe we can pick it back up if we want
Yeah,
to.
we'll pick it back up. Always great talking to you, Jay.
Yeah, you too. Thank you guys for watching what we do. We'll see you next time.
For show.